We are the American Legion Department of New Jersey. Be the one.
Let me ask you something. Is this the clicker for the slides? Is this the clicker for slides or no?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, oh. Okay. I'll figure that out. Good morning, everybody. How are ya? It's good to be back. I'm happy that y'all are alive because this is very much going to be a conversation, right? Like they told me I was keynoting and I like to talk at people, but it's better to talk with you because I think there are a lot of things I know and a lot of things that I don't know. And so I'm hoping that we can all talk and share ideas today. So feel free to like chime in, raise your hand, call out questions, use your outside voice if you have one. Hopefully you do. I'm Catherine. Jim gave me a really great introduction, but I am just a person with a big mouth and a lot of smart friends. And when Jim and Bob say come to New Jersey, I'm here. Like that's it, right? So I'm really excited to be here. I will tell you a tiny bit about NCHV. I don't feel like my slides are moving anywhere but left and right. I'm just pushing buttons at this point. But I'll tell you about NCHV while they come and help me figure out this clicker. We've been around for 35 years. This is our 35th anniversary. And we've been doing a lot of work to end veteran homelessness, even since before it was cool. I am lucky in that I get to stand on the shoulders of a lot of really great experts, including Vince Kane, who knew me when I very first started this work, and other local advocates who do amazing things out here.
This is mine.
Yes, that is yours.
You should be good.
Thank you. If I need it to, it's not like timed, so it'll just, what do I push to make it go?
So you can go back.
Yeah.
Forward.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, y'all. Pulling it together this morning. I had only one cup of coffee. But in any case, I'm not going to read my slides to you because there is a lot of data here, but I often think about veteran homelessness as how you get from point A to point B, right? And I feel like point A is understanding where you are, right? So I'll spend a little bit of time on this, right? There are some interesting numbers. We've seen a lot of declines nationally in veteran homelessness, right? Some really great declines, in large part due to the great work of people like you across the country who are really passionate about housing and homelessness and doing right by veterans across the country, right? But when you compare some of the numbers to New Jersey, I think y'all are doing okay, but you did see a little bit of increase. And there are some, things that worry me, right? And then things that you can do to mitigate that. So when you look at the numbers, right, overall you're down, but you're slightly up in the last year. And so when you think about that, you've got to think about why. And by the way, is the team from Monarch here? Your pick count report is amazing. I just need to tell you that. Like, there's some really solid data in that report that you don't often see across other states and communities that is really helpful for you to think through how you get from point A to point B. So thank you to you and your team for doing that. I did pull some of these slides and numbers from different places, right from the HUD point in time count, when you're thinking about just the numbers overall and where you're seeing the large portions of, percentages of veterans experiencing homelessness, right? So New Jersey actually is doing well. Like, you're doing okay. But when you look at your unsheltered numbers, right, there is a little bit of worry around why you're seeing so many more unsheltered veterans by population. And I think that's something to think about, is how you move people through shelters and how you create more housing and options for people. When you look at your numbers, right, this is just New Jersey specific from the Monarch report. And what we're looking at is the tiny bit of an increase that I think we saw and that probably we're all worried about here, and that's why we're here, right, to talk about it and figure out what we're gonna do. But this is some of the really great data that we're looking at, right, from the Monarch report, where you're thinking about the characteristics of who you're seeing who's unsheltered, right? Who's got mental health issues, who's got physical disabilities, who's dealing with, chronic health conditions or those types of things, because this helps you understand what kind of supports you need, how you build housing to sort of wrap around the services or, some of the issues that people are facing, right? So I'm hoping that you all will keep some of this in mind as you move through the day and you talk about solutions, as you think about what kind of housing and where, and as you think about what you all really need in your communities across the state to end veteran homelessness. This actually was the thing that stunned me the most in the report, right? Thinking about what people are actually struggling with and the causes of homelessness. And I've got to say, Vince Kane, we've probably had conversations about this for years, right? Can you just ask people not only are they homeless, but why? So we can figure out how to address it or what to do about it, what services and supports to offer, and quite frankly, how to prevent it, right? Because I think that there are things that you can do for veterans that you can't do for civilians because you've got more of a closed system where you can actually really address some of these at the medical center level or as they're transitioning out of the military or at other points in the conversation. And so when you look at some of these, you can really think about where you're intervening and how, right? Whether you're looking at, the 23 veterans who were released from prisons and jails, or, some of the folks who are looking at asking to leave shared housing situations or whatnot. Like, there are specific things that you can do for those people to prevent their homelessness or to address it really quickly and help them move forward. And so I just want you all to kind of keep some of these numbers in mind as we're thinking about what the point B is here, right? Now, when you think about your housing stock, there's not enough housing anywhere in this country, right? We are very much in a crisis of housing affordability across the country, and you can see that, folks who are earning minimum wage struggle to make it here. I mean, that's true of anywhere, but when you look at the housing minimum wage and the number of hours that someone would have to work a week to actually be able to afford housing without being rent cost burden, it's a lot of hours. 86 is crazy. Like, that is just crazy talk, and nobody should have to do that, right? And so we really need to think about what we're doing to create more affordable housing, and that's one of the reasons that I really love coming here to this event specifically, is because everyone here is passionate about creating affordable housing for veterans in their community. And I think that that is something that is sort of like the backbone, right, of ending veteran homelessness. Like, you need the services, you need the supports, but at the end of the day, everyone who runs through a shelter, everyone who runs through a program needs housing at the end of their program that they can afford in order to be stable. And so I'm so grateful that there are so many of you here to talk about that and to try and be a part of the solution. I started with creating a little bit of a solutions bank here, but really I'm at the point in this talk where we're sort of talking about how you get from point A to point B. Like, what is the point B, right? I think affordable housing is a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it. And so I would love to hear from you all if anyone wants to volunteer to start calling out what are the challenges that you're seeing. And maybe I don't even know how many of you are service providers or housing developers. Can I pause and say, if you're a housing developer, raise your hand. Raise it high. I'm far. I got old lady eyes, guys. Thank you. If you're a service provider, oh, a lot of service people. I like that. You're my peoples. Housing people are my people too. Federal partners. Okay, not as many. Interested people, just interested civilians who aren't really in the industry but care deeply. Okay, good. So, I mean, when you think about your point B, right? To me, I think about some of the baseline expectations, right? I want to see dramatic reductions in unsheltered homelessness, right? I want to see a community where there's enough housing for people and maybe an environment where people can thrive. But what does that actually mean? And I'm curious what that looks like to some of you who are, actually here in this state full time, all the time. No? Nobody? Are we shy? I'm going to pause. I'm good at sitting in awkward silence. I told you this was going to be a conversation, right? Does anybody want to volunteer an idea for what they would like the future to look like, given what we know about what people here are facing, given what we know about the housing situation? And never mind, maybe don't even look at the solutions bank right now. Just think about what your end state is back there. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Got it. No. Okay. Back there, young man. I like that. I see a lady in red here. Okay, that's That's possible. I feel like Vince Kane is an expert on some of those like waiver things, so you should definitely talk to him. He's back there, and I'm volunteering him. Bob Luby, of course you can go. Thank you. Hey. That's a lot. All right, this lady back here, and then I'll come up here to you with the purple tie. Gotcha. With the purple tie up here? Okay. Hold on. Because there's lots of ideas over here, but I realize I'm ignoring you all here. I know you got like smart people in this region of the room who are passionate and have thoughts. And the blue. Okay. Are there other good ideas in the red? Okay. All right. Who else? Ashish. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm taking notes for real. This lovely young lady in the stripes. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Okay. This lady in red right up here. Yeah. So I will tell you that some communities have it through their housing authority. I'm not sure if anybody locally has that. Service provider partners, do we know if that exists here in New Jersey? If there's so she asked if there's a portal where people can search for affordable housing when they get like their vouchers or it's called njhrc.gov. That is good to know. Okay. I see this young man with the hat. So yeah, I think they'd qualify for SSVF. You don't need a service-connected disability for that. If you're low income and you're like on the verge of homelessness, you absolutely could go in for SSVF. I think there are some housing vouchers specifically for older Americans. I'm not sure whether they're available readily here in this community, but if you'd like to talk more, I'm sure I could ask around. I have smart friends. I don't always have the answers, but I could certainly find them for you. Um, who else has ideas about the point B? I'm going to go here and then there. It's okay. 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 and this lady here with the beautiful brown hair. That, that is fair. Any other last ideas before I start to run through your list of ideas and sort of tack them to the solutions bank a little bit, right? Because I think the idea here is that there are local challenges, right, that I don't know about, but there are lots of solutions that are very universal. And there are some national best practices that can be applied to some of these sort of point B type solutions, right? And I'm so thankful to all of you who spoke up and all of you who are even just thinking and sort of marinating in your own ideas, because that's the point of today, right? Is to figure out what we want to build and how we move things forward together. When I was thinking about this talk over the weekend, I sort of bucketed my solutions into offensive and defensive, and maybe I might have been watching football, and that's why, this came out in this way, right? But at the national level, we do look a lot at how we, build and how we block, right? And so I'll start with defense because I think that there are some concerning things that we're seeing out in the world, right? And I know someone mentioned folks who, I think there was a lady here who mentioned sort of the NIMBYism and all of the available housing, but people sort of saying, oh yeah, I support veterans, but maybe like, I don't want them here. And there are some communities where, it's as bad as seeing local legislators saying, yeah, we don't want that shelter here, or we don't want that veteran affordable housing in this community because of whatever stereotype, right? And I think that that's a problem and a huge misnomer. And so, there are things that all of us in this room can do, right? As we're thinking just about telling the stories of the people who we help and why we do what we do that really matter to how we work over opposition, right? I think that there are also a lot of communities where we're seeing some really troubling movements towards criminalizing poverty and sort of arresting people, finding and ticketing them for being outside. And, that to me is probably among the most worrisome things that we're dealing with right now because, people struggle enough already. Like if you're outside, you're not out there for fun, right? You're out there because something happened to you. You can't afford to be somewhere else. And so to add insult to injury and, tell you, oh, well, you can't afford to be inside, so now you got to pay $200 a day to be outside is, quite frankly, some nonsense, right? It just is. And so I think that there are a number of places where we're seeing things like that take hold. And I don't know that I've heard about any of that happening here in New Jersey, but I think that that's something to kind of be mindful of because, there are all of us here in this room being sort of a sea of goodwill, but there are other rooms where there are seas of people who are pushing model legislation on state houses and trying to really work things in the opposite direction, right? I think that there's a lot that you can do with regard to advocacy, and I heard that you have a really cool state housing voucher program that I only found out about 2 nights ago, and that I'm excited to learn more about, hopefully, if it comes up while I'm still here today. But there's a lot that you can do in your state to really get housing going, right? And there is, I'm gonna skip forward, not to this, but to here, because we do at NCHV, in partnership with the Home Depot Foundation, produce what we call the QAP report. And it is sort of a means to help local advocates get more tax credit funding in their state dedicated to veteran affordable housing development. And so there is a QR code there if anyone is interested in taking a look. It sort of lays out where your state is in the process. And there's also a toolkit for how to sort of comment in the comment period and make sure that you're making your state housing finance agency aware of the need to dedicate more funding to veteran affordable housing. We also have a podcast that I think is actually starting today. It's season, I don't know, 5 or 6. I feel like I have Jim Scanlon problems. It's a new season. It runs for 8 weeks, and it's focused on revitalization. And actually, there was a really great comment from back there about housing that's available that could be developed. And I believe that there is going to be an episode somewhere during the season on land banks and some of the creative things that different communities are doing to revitalize just scattered site housing or, other buildings that you can turn into housing, whether it's schools or armories. I think there's a school conversion episode too. So if you're interested in that, definitely take a look. I'm going to go back to the solutions bank slide, or maybe I'm not, because it looks like somebody is, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm driving my slides in the wrong direction apparently. But, you know, when you sort of tack some of the problems onto the solution bank, right, there were offensive solutions. Now I'm not going backwards, but some of them looked at developing housing, which I think will be a really great topic of interest today, because we always need more housing. But housing, to Ashish's point, takes a long time, right? And that's something that you've got to figure out with, you know, your state house, your local regulators, and quite frankly, federal funding streams, right? How do you make things work faster? How do you make things work more efficiently? And that's not an easy process, but there are a lot of folks, as we see, who need housing today, right? Or yesterday, or the day before. And I think that there is room to do more work when you're thinking about what folks in DC, and this is very DC, but naturally occurring affordable housing, right? So housing that's there, it's affordable, relatively easy to access if you're doing a lot of work with landlords, with like navigating things. And I did want to share one of the interesting things that we've been doing or testing down in Atlanta. It's called the Love Fund. And we've been finding really good results where we had a corporate partner seed a fund. And basically what we do is we look for landlords who would not be willing to rent to veterans, but for a small subsidy. And what we're finding is that for under, I think it's about $1,500 per intervention, you can bring new landlords into the fold, right? They can do a little bit of property improvement or whatever. And a lot of them are ending up bringing more than just their one unit, right? So yes, they bring the one unit, they have an experience with a provider, and then they're like, oh, well, I have 2 more units. Who do you have who can fill the unit? And, you know, I think that works really well in large communities like Atlanta, but there may be room to think about, you know, whether some of that might be replicable in other parts of the world. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges that people have, right, and thinking through how you provide the appropriate amount of social services and supports is an interesting problem to sort of mull over, right? Because I think that there are a lot of veterans who are well served by the homeless system, and then a lot of folks who just fall through the cracks, right? Particularly when you're looking at the families or the people with pets or folks who don't quite fit into the general mold of, you know, what shelters and services were developed for, you know, 30 years ago when people really started doing this. And I do think that there's room to innovate there, right? I think that some of my favorite things in our field have come from innovation and people sort of seeing gaps and moving the ball a little bit differently. And so I think there's a lot of room to think about that. But I do want to talk a little bit about advocacy, because I think advocacy is something that was sort of on both edges of the coin, right? Like offensive and defensive. And it is an interesting time in DC, so I would be remiss for not saying anything about advocacy and standing here in front of all of you. There's a lot of work to do, quite frankly, right? The government is partially shut down. It's an interesting time. There's been a lot of change in DC, and it's imperative on all of us, right, to talk to our electeds about the things that matter, the things that veterans need, and the things that we need them to do, because I think there is a lot of political will to help veterans and to support VA, but it's really easy for elected officials to forget that veterans are Americans too, right? And some of them rely on SNAP, some of them rely on Medicaid, some of them rely on older American services and other things that are on the chopping block, right? Never mind that we need more funding in all of our programs at VA to do what we do well across the country. And so I do just want to put a plug in for folks to really be thoughtful about how you're building relationships with your delegation and your electeds and what you're saying to them, because, you know, I was a staffer once and I only knew what I knew. I was lucky to have folks like Vince Kane and Bruce and his predecessors come and tell me what I needed to know, right? I mean, a lot of these folks are young. I was in my 20s. Like, I'll be real, I didn't know anything about anything, but I was just thankful enough to have some smart friends to tell me what I needed to know. And so I'm hoping that all of you will become smart friends of people who are decision makers. I feel like this is a point where I should rally the troops and like, rah, 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 let's go get them. But I do want to pause for some questions in case there are questions out in the audience about, you know, anything happening in DC or best practices in other places or anything at all. Okay. So I'm going to repeat the question for folks in that corner. This lovely gentleman asked about the Mount Laurel decision, right, that requires affordable units in any new developments. And I think he's curious about where we stand, what we do to advocate for veterans taking those units, and is wondering if anybody's got a local perspective. I've got a national best practice that I can inject, but if somebody's got a local flavor and wants to like shout it out.
We are the American Legion Department of New Jersey. Be the one.